Well, how are other countries where the R is currently at 1.02? What are these countries doing? Now, one of the countries where the R rate is as high as India is Australia. Australia has been going through a cycle of lockdowns across cities after the Delta strain caused a huge spike in infections. There are army patrols being seen on the streets of Sydney, which is now in its 6th week of lockdown. Brisbane has extended its lockdown. Only 19% of Australian adults have been fully vaccinated. Now, the reason why Australia's pace of vaccination has been slower is because most people actually prefer the Pfizer shot. And the Pfizer vaccine is in short supply. Many are concerned with the risks that are associated with AstraZeneca. So people have refused to take AstraZeneca and are preferring Pfizer, which is in short supply, which is why Australia's rate of vaccination continues to remain lower. The Australian Prime Minister has said that restrictions are going to persist in the country till it reaches a much higher level of vaccination coverage. To understand what's really happening with the COVID crisis in Australia, we have Professor Nikolai Petrovsky from the College of Medicine and Public Health, Flinders University, Adelaide, joining us. Thanks very much, Professor, for being with us. I want you to tell us a little more about the Delta surge in Australia. The R, the reproductive rate in Australia, is also as high as it is in India at the moment.
Yes, there's similarities, but there are also major differences, because what you need to realise is Australia for the last year has actually run a policy of having no COVID. So we're coming off a situation where most of the states have been COVID-free for the majority of the last year. So, you know, what we saw in New South Wales today, for instance, is a spike. But we're talking 233 confirmed cases today of COVID in the whole of New South Wales, which is a population of over 5 million people. So that's a tiny number of infections on a population basis. But of course, it's a big increase from several weeks ago when there were 0 cases. So although our R0 is over 1, and so we're seeing that increase in Delta in Western Sydney, we're actually talking a tiny number of cases. But of course, we'd like to get it back to 0 where it was before, until we get our vaccination rates much higher. As you said, they're still very low in Australia.
Yes, absolutely. I think in terms of absolute numbers, there's no comparison. But since we're talking about the R rate and the R rate being a huge cause of concern here, the government in India here has issued a warning about the fact that the pandemic is still raging because the R is well above 1. What do you think countries need to do, big or small, when the R crosses 1?
Well, you have to get the R below 1, and you have to do everything in your power to do that. And we know the strategies that will drop the R0 below 1. You know, social distancing is the most effective of all. You know, mask wearing, people still argue about it, but I think overall the evidence is it does have an impact, even if it's just on behaviour. Even if the mask itself isn't necessarily stopping the virus being shed. And then, of course, vaccination, you know, will contribute to that. But by itself, the current vaccines are not particularly good at blocking transmission. So they might have a small effect on the R0, but it's not going to be massive. So while vaccination rates are still low,
yes,
you know, we have to rely on shutdowns, you know, social isolation, hand washing, all of the things that we've been told to do over the last year, which in Australia have been very effective. The only outbreaks have come from hotel quarantine. So
yes,
we still have a problem with how to do quarantine properly.
I want to also very quickly address this question of vaccine hesitancy, because it's been widely reported that there is hesitancy with the AstraZeneca vaccine and a shortage of the Pfizer vaccine in Australia, which is why the rate of vaccination has been lower. Vaccine hesitancy is not just an Australia problem, it's an Indian problem as well. How are you tackling it?
So I think the problem is, the lack of choice. So as you know, when you have only 2 vaccines that are approved in the country, and then one, falls under a cloud, rightly or wrongly, because of a side effect, and then the other one is in incredibly short supply because, most of the world, has decided it wants the mRNA vaccines, you have a major problem.
Right.
And it's hard because, you can't tell people or mandate people to have a vaccine that they're not confident in. And obviously the population have lost trust in the government. And that's the sad truth. The government promised too much. They should have been more conservative. They should have warned people that vaccines do come with some risks. In fact, for the last year, they've been telling everyone vaccines are 100% safe and not allowing that room to move.
Right.
And now, of course, they're dealing with the consequences, and it's difficult because when you lose public trust, how do you get it back?
All right. Well, I think those are important points and important challenges that both our countries continue to face. One sincerely hopes we can tide over them. Thanks so much for joining us from Adelaide with all those updates. Thank you.